Brian and I both perished on the flight returning from our divorce. Before the crash he said, if I could do it over, I'd marry Joyce. Being with her is the only time I feel alive. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day he proposed to me. He lifted the bouquet in his hands, turned and rushed toward Joyce in the crowd, dropping to one knee. Joyce, will you marry me? I know that he was reborn too. As he wished, I gave them my blessing. But later, he regretted it, knelt down, and begged me to change my mind. Joyce, incredulous, covered her mouth with both hands and nodded repeatedly, tears of delight falling as the two of them held each other tightly. The gossiping crowd, unaware of the truth, all cheered and offered their blessings. But someone still asked in puzzlement, wasn't Brian going to propose to Selena? How did it turn into Joyce? Exactly, Brian said it was for Selena in the group chat and even asked us to come cheer her on. What's going on here? Who knows? They held each other tightly for a long time. Brian turned and picked up the microphone in his hand. Thank you all for coming today to witness our love. I didn't know my true feelings before, but now I do. The one I've always liked is Joyce. I was the one who missed her before. For the rest of my life I don't want to miss her again. I'm willing to spend the rest of my life with her, to grow old together hand in hand. After saying that he glanced at me calmly, you can't force a melon to be sweet. What we had before was a mistake. I hope we can part amicably. Selena, please don't cling to this. The ringing in my ears from the explosion gradually faded. I had been reborn to the day Brian was going to propose to me in my past life. Looking at Brian in front of me, and remembering that in our last life he said that if he could live again he would choose Joyce, I knew he had been reborn too. At this moment his expression was exactly like it had been at 38 in our previous life, cool and rational, years of business decisions having given him a mature, steady air. But now we were still sophomores in college, and Brian and I had been dating for 2 years. He chose Valentine's Day to notify all our classmates and friends he was close to, and had set up a huge field of flowers on the school track at night to propose to me. Actually, Joyce was part of the reason for this proposal. Joyce was a year ahead of us. She was the lead singer of a band, beautiful, lively, flamboyant, free-spirited, someone who loved and hated with equal daring. At the welcome party she fell in love with Brian at first sight and repeatedly made advances, bringing him breakfast, giving him gifts, and, through student council work, deliberately creating opportunities for the two of them to be alone. Even knowing I existed, she would say, "We're not married anyway, life should be bolder. When you meet someone you like, you should take the initiative. If you don't try, how will you know who the right person is?" Brian always replied with a sullen face, yet she still stuck to him with a radiant smile. Brian was annoyed and planned to propose to me on Valentine's Day, to make Joyce see clearly that he intended to marry me, that he wouldn't like Joyce. When Brian proposed to me in the previous life, Joyce stood at the very front of the crowd, wearing a red dress, bold and flamboyant, shouting at Brian, "Brian, think it through. If you really succeed in proposing, I truly won't like you anymore. I'm asking you one last time now, are you willing to be with me or not?" The Brian of the previous life answered with conviction, "The woman I spend my life with will only be Selena. I only love Selena. I hope Senior won't keep interfering." But now he says our relationship was a mistake, and he tells me not to entangle myself with it. Facing the curious stares of everyone around us, I looked calmly at their tightly clasped hands. Fine. From this moment on, we break up. From now on, the bridge is a bridge and the road is a road. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. At my words, Brian breathed a sigh of relief. Joyce jumped onto him in excitement, legs wrapped around his waist. "I knew it, you'd be mine. But you took so long to agree to be with me, you owe me compensation." "Okay, what kind of compensation do you want?" "I want to feel what it's like to ride a motorcycle at full speed." "Piece of cake, no problem. I also want to go to the mountaintop and sing." "Okay. I want to taste every drink in every bar." "No problem." Brian looked at her with indulgent affection, as if gazing upon a recovered treasure. Everyone applauded and cheered in unison. "Kiss. Kiss. Kiss." Kiss. My roommate stood up for me. Brian is way out of line. Isn't this public cheating? He said it all so high-minded, about finally understanding his true feelings. Where was he earlier? Why now, breaking up? Exactly, he called all the classmates over. It was supposed to be a proposal for Selena, but instead he announced a breakup in front of everyone and seamlessly moved on to the next person. What a scumbag. I turned and called to them, let's go, didn't you say there's a bar opening tonight? Come on, my treat. They watched me calmly drink one glass after another. They were worried and kept urging me to let it go, saying there was no need to be upset over a jerk like that. I smiled, put my arms around them, and said I was actually happy. I really was glad to be away from him. Come to think of it, Brian and I were neighbors, childhood sweethearts, from families of equal standing. A match between prominent families was inevitable. The two households had practically arranged us as a couple. We encouraged and supported each other all the way. We agreed we'd wait until we got into university to start dating, that we'd marry after graduation. Everything would naturally fall into place. In the previous life, after we married, our days gradually filled with work, grocery shopping and cooking, childcare and education. The love between us slowly faded. He said more than once that life lacked passion, that it was too smooth, too boring. At that time Joyce had become a somewhat famous rock singer. Her flamboyant, fiery movements at music festivals would often hold Brian's gaze for a long time. Even a single video of her he would watch over and over. Later he deliberately found reasons to get close to her. Joyce then lived by a carpe diem creed, was against marriage, and had just broken up with her previous boyfriend. One deliberately drew close, the other was easygoing and carefree. Two grown adults needed no many words, and they had slept together several times. When I discovered it, I naturally questioned him, but he said I could sleep with other men too. None of us belonged to the other. Seeing the indifferent look in his eyes and the tenderness he once had for me completely gone, I asked for a divorce. At first he refused. After all, dividing our assets would be complicated. In the end he relented under my insistence. He only looked at me with mockery. Indeed, being with someone easygoing and carefree is the happiest. These past 2 weeks with Joyce have surpassed all the joy of my first half of life. The unrestrained boldness I never had in my youth, I finally have now. You, raised in a wealthy, pedigreed family and taught to follow the rules, always think with your head, your heart only counts gain and loss. You'll never understand what a passionate, unrestrained life feels like. I could only think how I had never noticed before that he had this foolishly naive side. He fancied himself having grasped the secret of life, not realizing that without a material foundation to shore it up, even the most carefree, dashing existence is a castle built of scattered sand. A gust will blow it apart. Because I had drunk too much, I went to the restroom again. On the way I passed a private room whose door wasn't shut tight and happened to hear someone asking, "Tell me, Brian, what you pulled off on the field today was really unexpected. I heard you and Selena grew up together. Do you really not like her anymore?" Brian exhaled a smoke ring. Childhood sweetheart? Just because we grew up together and our parents set us up, I mistook it for love. It was nothing more than ordinary friendship. Her calm, rational nature is exactly not what I like. Then who do you really like? Someone teased. Brian swept Joyce into his arms. Of course it's Joyce. The hallway was narrow, someone brushing past bumped me. A half-open door I accidentally pushed wider. The people inside looked at me and fell silent. Brian tapped his cigarette into the ashtray, frowning at me. Didn't we already agree to break up? Aren't you supposed to stop pestering me? What are you doing here now? Joyce immediately sat on Brian's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck and proclaiming her claim. I told you from the start, nobody knows the end until the end. Now Brian has chosen me, you wouldn't try to take him back, would you? Brian patted her shoulder reassuringly. Don't worry, I'm not one to go back to old flames. I couldn't help but laugh. They really were a perfect match, equally self-absorbed. Relax, I'm just passing through. I'm not in the business of recycling trash. As I turned to leave, I saw Brian's expression darken for a moment. The feelings that had been worn smooth in a previous life were gone without a trace. I no longer felt any ripple at the sight of the life they were enjoying. In the instant I turned, I collided with someone's embrace. My hand instinctively landed on the other person's chest for support. It's quite firm. I looked up and, to my surprise, it was Nathan. The eldest young master of the Gu family in the north of the city, 5 years older than me, who had just finished his studies abroad this year and taken over the family business. Under the wavering lights of the bar, he wore a black shirt buttoned to the top. His cold, handsome face, accentuated by the dark lighting, looked incredibly restrained. He was slightly bowed, eyes lowered as he looked over at me. Realizing I was still lying against his chest, I coughed awkwardly, stepped back, and apologized. At that moment someone else in the private room spoke up. Actually, Selena is pretty. Brian, since you two have broken up, I'm going to go after her. Whatever. Let me ask a personal question, have you two ever, Brian scoffed, she's so conservative, insists on being engaged before anything happens. Boring and rigid. Heh, then I'll have to take that as a challenge. Joyce's displeased voice came through. If you manage to propose tonight, wouldn't you be the one winning the beauty? Right now you're the beauty. To celebrate being together, why don't we go to my place tonight? Ugh. The man before me had a sullen expression, his voice husky. Broken up? So you're single now? Hearing their conversation made me frown in disgust. The excess alcohol churning in my stomach was becoming unbearable. I muttered a vague reply and hurried toward the restroom. I was about to collide with someone ahead when a hand slipped around my waist. I couldn't hold back any longer and, with a gagging cry, vomited onto the front of the person's shirt. The black shirt instantly bore a three-dimensional pattern. Sorry, whoa. No need to go to the bathroom now, everything came up at once. Both of our clothes and shoes were ruined. I covered my face, I'd never been so humiliated. I heard him telling the waiter to clean up while asking me if there was a hotel upstairs and whether I wanted to get a room to wash up first. I nodded. Maybe I'd drunk too much and vomited so much my legs went weak. He murmured excuse me and, with a hold around my waist, lifted me into the elevator. After freshening up, I came out and was surprised to see Nathan standing in the same spot. He explained that this room had only one bathroom, so I quickly stepped aside. At that moment my roommate called, saying the dormitory was about to lock up and we should head back. I could only briefly explain and tell them to go back first. I'd book a room at a hotel a little later. Then there was a knock at the door and someone delivered 2 sets of clothes, 1 men's, 3 women's, and some honey water. I looked at the bathroom's glass door and wondered how I should repay this kindness. Hearing the splashing in the bathroom, I suddenly remembered that after my shower I had tossed my underwear on the sink, and my robe and towel were now all on me. I clenched my fists and screamed silently. In my last life I hardly ever made mistakes, and having 2 embarrassing incidents right after being reborn was just too much. I was about to break down. I hurried out to the front desk to book a room, but they were all full and there were no robes left. The front desk did, however, find a bath sheet and towels. When the water stopped running inside, I quickly leaned in and said I had taken a new bath towel. I turned away and handed it to him through the crack of the door, accidentally brushing his fingers. I couldn't help but flinch. When he came out drying his hair, I saw the 6-pack of abs exposed beyond the bath towel, droplets of water still trickling down. Maybe it was the wine, but his face was flushed. I quickly turned away and said someone had brought clothes and honey water. The hand drying his hair paused. I didn't know what size you wear, so I bought 3 different sizes. See which one fits. Honey water for the hangover, bought it for you. Thank you. Then I said dejectedly that the hotels were all full. I didn't know what was going on, there seemed to be so many people staying in hotels. He thought for a moment, raised his brow and said, maybe it's because of Valentine's Day. I suddenly remembered that too, and once the topic came up the atmosphere felt a bit awkward. I forced a laugh. I'll go check other hotels, so I won't bother you and your girlfriend. He walked over to me, his 6-pack faced me straight on as I sat on the sofa, and I suddenly felt a little dry in the mouth. He looked at me seriously. I don't have a girlfriend. He reached past me to grab a hairdryer and added, besides, other hotels are probably full, and a girl shouldn't be running around looking for a place so late at night. I frowned. If I went home at this hour, my parents would definitely drill me about what happened. My mother, having seen so many news reports about campus bullying, would overthink my coming home late, and, if she found out about Jibachin, they'd probably lose sleep over it. Actually, you can sleep here for now. You take the bed, I'll take the sofa. I gave him a searching look. He couldn't help but smile and explain, our families do business with each other, trust me, I wouldn't do anything to you. When I think about it, I remember that in his past life he never married, yet under his leadership the company flourished. There were always rumors in the circles that he didn't like women, or else that he had some illness. Thinking that put me at ease. If he had no partner, there was nothing to worry about. And looking at his strong chest, six-pack abs, long powerful legs, and especially that handsome, well-defined face. If anything ever happened, I wouldn't be at a loss. As I relaxed, the languor from the drinks washed over me. After he finished blow-drying his hair, he looked at my long curls and said, "Aren't you going to blow-dry them?" I touched it, already half dry, then took the hairdryer and gave it a quick blast. The more I dried, the more awake I became. The two of us sat in awkward silence. I glanced at my phone for a moment and said, "It's late. Get some rest." After the lights were out, the senses grew keener. Just as sleep was starting to come, vague amorous noises drifted in and I instantly remembered that hotels were fully booked today because of Valentine's Day. Maybe it was because my period was about to start, my mood turned prickly. I lay there with my eyes open, listening to the sounds through the wall, feeling another presence in the room, and asked softly, "Are you asleep?" No. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the fact we'd both died once and wanted to let go for a moment, or maybe the mood had simply arrived and my emotions with it. Bathed in moonlight, staring at the calf peeking out from the sofa, I swallowed and said, "The bed's pretty big. Do you want to sleep in it?" His voice dropped, becoming husky. "Do you know what you're saying?" I suddenly recalled the rumor from my past life. "Are you sure you can't? Medicine is quite advanced now. If there's really something wrong, don't be afraid to seek treatment. Otherwise you'll end up a bachelor for life." Feeling the mattress sink beside me, he propped himself over me. "Is that reverse psychology? If you want to know whether I can do it, you can find out for yourself." Sensing the heat beneath me, my body tensed, and boldly I reached out my hand. "You won't know until you try." A night of ups and downs. It seems the rumor was wrong. Not only could he, but he was very good. I woke the next day with my lower back aching unbearably. The room was empty. I tidied up quickly and headed out, and right at the hotel entrance I ran into Nathan. He pointed to the takeout boxes in his hand. I picked up some breakfast. "Are you heading back to school now? I can drive you." Not feeling well, I didn't make a fuss and ate a mouthful of milk and a bite of sandwich in his car. As I was getting out, he waved his phone a little. "Can I get your contact?" His fingers tapped the steering wheel in a steady rhythm, and the way he looked at me was undeniably forward. As a 38-year-old soul, I understood perfectly. I thought for a moment, then lifted the corners of my mouth in a smile. "Sure." On the way to class, I ran into Brian and Joyce coming the other way. I ignored them and kept walking, but Brian blocked my path. "Where did you go last night?" "That's my business." "Aren't you being a little too nosy?" His expression darkened. "Someone saw you being carried up to a hotel room by a man last night." "Who was that man? What happened between you two?" I scoffed. "Who I choose to be with is my business. If I remember correctly, we broke up yesterday." "Saying that makes me think you still have feelings for me." Joyce's expression changed too. She tore her arm from Brian's grip. "If she wants to go to a hotel with someone, let her. Why do you care so much? You can't really still have feelings for her, can you?" Brian grabbed her arm and coaxed. "I only cared because we're neighbors. My feelings for you are true as heaven and earth. Right now there's only you in my heart, otherwise why would I have chosen you in front of so many people yesterday? Brian looked at me coolly. Don't get me wrong either. I brought up the breakup yesterday because I was worried you might be acting recklessly and looking for someone else to provoke me if you couldn't let me go. As long as that's not the case, it's fine. I sneered coldly. Sometimes it's better not to be too full of yourself. You're not the only man in the world. You started a new life, so of course I'll have a new boyfriend too. Ignoring the frown he made, I turned and walked away. Too self-absorbed and so double-faced. Just because Joyce chased him for 2 years does he think he's irresistible? The school's chatter about the dramatic proposal on Valentine's Day gradually faded. Brian and Joyce's ship gained more fans. He rode his bike with her on the back, letting them feel the summer breeze around campus, just like the leads in a school idol drama. They kissed on the mountaintop and vowed to love each other for a lifetime. They rode a motorcycle hurtling down midnight roads, tasting the thrill that speed brought. They sang at the seaside at night, voicing the freedom of life. They each had the other's initials tattooed on their waists to express their intense love. By this time Joyce had already gained some followers for her singing on social media. Plus, she often posted couple photos and videos, and some ardent love captions drew a crowd of onlookers. Many people said they were a perfect match, like the protagonists of a novel. And Brian, as he had hoped in his previous life, finally had a passionate, flamboyant, and reckless youth. When Brian posted the photo with Joyce, both families learned the whole story. Mom and Dad were furious. I could only try to calm them. It's better this was cleared up early. It's far better than discovering infidelity after entering marriage. To put their minds at ease, I also told them that I no longer had any feelings for Brian, so they wouldn't have to worry about it. Mom looked at me with relief and nodded. You've always been sensible. Always leave yourself a margin when it comes to love, that way, when things change you can walk away whole. My father pondered. It seems we'll need to change the partner for that Northern City project. I said nothing. In my last life Brian and I were a couple, and each family's business collaborations were always chosen with the other in mind first. Last time the Northern City project went to the Yee family, but I knew they weren't the best fit. It was just that because of Brian and me we preferred not to let a good opportunity slip to outsiders, and it also tightened the ties between our families. But in this life, since we can't become one family, I'll only consider who offers the greater benefit. My studies weren't very demanding, so in my spare time I interned at the company. I also often attended business banquets to broaden my horizons and build connections. This weekend I attended an elder's 80th birthday. After greeting my father and a few relatives, I went to the dessert table to rest for a while. At that moment Brian's younger brother walked over carrying a glass of wine. Miss Selena, you look very beautiful today, he said. I thanked him politely. He took a sip of his drink and, looking at me, asked, I heard Miss Selena hasn't found a partner for the project in the north of the city yet? I shook my head and said, I don't know, my father is handling that matter. He let out a low chuckle. My big brother really threw away a winning hand, losing the watermelon and probably not even picking up the sesame seeds. How could he dare skip an event like this? I gave no answer. He looked at me with a teasing smile and asked, come to think of it, I'm only about 2 years younger than Miss Selena. Why not give me a chance, Miss Selena? I declined politely, saying I wanted to stay a little longer, then dismissed him. A low, husky voice came from nearby, Miss Selena is quite sought after. Seeing the newcomer, my fingers tightened around the cup. Mr. Nathan, eavesdropping isn't what a gentleman does. He leaned in slightly and murmured, a gentleman remains composed in temptation. Facing Miss Selena, I truly cannot pretend to be one. The closeness of his body instantly brought back that wild, drunken night. I swirled the wine in my glass. What do you mean by that, Mr. Nathan? That younger son of the Yee family just now, he's too young. If you're considering a match, Miss Selena, you might give me a thought. What do you think? I looked at the man before me, whose mature charm was undeniable, and thought of the business moves he'd make in the coming years. I had to admit he was capable and shrewd. If I were to choose him as a partner, I was about to answer when a hush of murmurs rose from the distance. Turning to look, I realized Brian had actually arrived. Not only had he come, but he had brought Joyce with him. They must have just ridden back on a motorcycle. They were still wearing biker's gear, standing out awkwardly among the crowd of suits and formal dresses. Brian's father, Charles, was speaking to him in low tones. From his expression, he seemed very angry. Joyce, on the other hand, relaxed and linked her arm through Brian's, looking here and there. After greeting the elderly Edward, who was celebrating his birthday, Brian led Joyce over. "Aren't you full? Didn't you just eat fried noodles? I want to try the dim sum here. See if what they serve at a rich person's banquet is different from what's served at an ordinary restaurant." "All right, suit yourself." The two of them carried on their intimacy as if no one existed. When they saw me, Brian gave a faint nod. Joyce took a piece here, another piece there. She picked up her phone and snapped a photo of herself. Finally she carried a pastry over to me and did a little twirl. "You rich people sure care about ceremony. Someone throws a birthday party and you've got to wear gowns and suits, act like it's a big deal." Someone nearby couldn't hold back. "This is how you dress for a party, to show respect. But you, in that biker outfit with your hair all messed up, walking in here like that is really disrespectful, isn't it?" Joyce ran her fingers through her hair. "I'm just casual like this. That old gentleman who was celebrating his birthday even praised us young people for being energetic and lively, said we're sincere and unpretentious. But you lot, always pretending, aren't you tired of it?" At her words, everyone who heard them looked at her with anger, and their glare extended to Brian as well. Brian stepped in front of Joyce and offered a cool apology. "Joyce is straightforward and honest, hope no one takes offense. After all, it's not appropriate to cause a scene at the old gentleman's birthday banquet. In his previous life he sat in a high position and people flattered him, his cold attitude drew no comment. But now he was just a college student with no job and no title, and speaking so curtly immediately made the people around him regard him with displeasure. Someone his age asked, "Brian, what do you even like about her?" "Selena clearly has the family background, looks, and capability." For a moment, all eyes turned to me. Brian frowned and shot me a glance first. "Selena is fine, but to me Joyce is the best." He then took Joyce's hand and said what he liked most was Joyce's frankness and passion. Being with her made him feel relaxed and happy. Joyce grew bolder and gave him an impromptu, passionate kiss right then and there. The faces of those around them turned sour. To behave so rudely at a formal event was truly unseemly. Someone sneered, "What, are you filming a teen idol drama here?" I heard that after the banquet, Brian's father Charles gave him a huge dressing down. He told him to break up with Joyce and to apologize to me, saying only I could help his career. Brian refused, insisting he was capable and didn't need a woman, and in the end they parted on bad terms. I, however, breathed a sigh of relief. Brian is on my blacklist now, so let him stride off and be with Joyce. And don't you dare come crawling back to me, or I'll be so disgusted I won't be able to sleep. My father ultimately chose to partner with the Gu family on the project in the north of the city. He spoke of Nathan in nothing but praise. So Nathan came to our house for a meal again. I was planning to go back to school in the afternoon. Nathan said it was on his way and offered to give me a ride. As we were about to get out, the car doors were still locked, and I looked at him in confusion. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, his gaze a little aggressive. About the banquet hall issue, Miss Selena still hasn't given me an answer. I remembered immediately and narrowed my eyes at him. Are you serious? Do I look like I'm joking? I looked at him, slightly nervous, and smiled, all right. He stared at me, dumbfounded. What? Isn't Mr. Nathan the one who wanted to court me? I agreed. If I had to pick someone for an arranged marriage, Nathan was indeed a good choice. At least in his previous life he'd remained single and hadn't had any scandals. He stared at me intently. You really agreed? I smiled and ran my index finger along his jaw. Mr. Nathan is handsome and capable. Saying yes should be a normal thing. Is Mr. Nathan surprised? He grabbed my hand. I do find it a little hard to believe. I leaned over and kissed his lips, giving a gentle bite. Believe me now? His deep eyes churned with emotion, and he pressed his hand to the back of my head, taking the initiative. They only parted when we were both gasping. He stroked my lips. Summer's almost here. What are you planning to do? I had planned to intern at my family's company over the summer, but looking at Nathan, I suddenly changed my mind. How about I intern at your company for 2 months? He smiled. Don't want to be apart from me? I answered honestly. Everyone knows Mr. Nathan is very capable. I want to apprentice under him, will you give me the chance? Delighted. And so, throughout the summer I stayed by Nathan's side as his assistant, genuinely sensing his keen awareness of industry trends and his decisive way of handling things. He really was a workaholic, working late until midnight was common, and he was very disciplined, getting up at 6 every morning to start exercising. He also had plenty of self-control. When beautiful women flirted with him at dinners, he politely declined them. Was I teasing him about being truly unmoved? He replied that if he really accepted benefits, the percentages would have to be reduced by a few points. For him, the contract was still the most important thing. If I hadn't felt his vigor at night, I would have suspected he really was ill. Once after, I asked him if he hadn't met me, would he have stayed single forever? He thought for a moment and said he didn't know, because he'd already made a 20-year plan for Goo Corporation. Maybe he'd be too busy with work, or maybe he'd be with someone suitable when he met her. I couldn't help but scoff inwardly. You'd be single into your 40s and still never meet anyone suitable. I asked him why he chose me. He said he didn't know either. He first saw me at a banquet, and afterward he even made inquiries about me, but at the time Brian was by my side. Only when he learned we had broken up did he make the first move. Unknowingly, 5 years passed. After university, at Nathan's suggestion I went abroad to further my studies. Combined with what I learned by his side, I felt my capabilities had grown strong, in managing the company, in carrying out projects, in appointing personnel. I became increasingly confident and adept. The year I returned home, Nathan proposed and I accepted. During those 5 years, Brian and Joyce continued to live a wild, carefree life. They graduated wearing a suit and a wedding dress. Their graduation wedding even trended on social media. People praised it as the truest form of love. In the previous life, nonconformist Joyce married the man who had courted her for 2 years, and Brian, as he had said before, married the passionate, flamboyant Joyce. We had different pursuits and lived the lifestyles we wanted. I thought that was the ending. But life is like compiling a collection of wrong answers. There will always be someone who comes along and overturns everything you once did. Brian had started working at the company, and Joyce became a rock singer. Friends said they broke up and got back together several times. As their fan base grew, and because of Brian's status, their romance often made the trending lists. I understand, life ought to be lived with passion. But lately the news of their breakup wouldn't stop circulating. Someone had captured footage of Brian and Joyce arguing. Someone else released a video of Joyce dancing closely with another man at a bar. I skimmed the gossip like anyone schemes celebrity news, then threw myself back into busy work and the wedding arrangements. That day after work, Nathan was leading me outside when an unexpected number lit up my phone. I tapped to answer and heard the voice on the other end telling me to look not far to the side. Brian was standing there, holding his phone and staring at me. Nathan tightened his grip on my hand. I patted him reassuringly. Wait a moment, I said. It's probably something work-related. I'll be right back. They were all in the same circle. I had met Brian a few times, mostly at work. He kissed my forehead as if to stake a claim, and I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. It wasn't until I stepped closer to Brian that I smelled the strong scent of smoke on him. I looked at him coolly. For work matters, Mr. Brian, it's better to contact me during office hours. He tugged at the corner of his mouth and glanced at me. How have you been lately? I raised an eyebrow. Pretty well. He didn't seem interested in talking about work, and I had no reason to stay, was about to say goodbye and leave. He drew out another cigarette and lit it. I've been doing a little, not so well. I frowned at his cigarette and took 2 silent steps away. From his confessions I learned that ever since graduating and joining the company, he'd spent less and less time with Joyce. But Joyce still called her friends and went out to parties often, having fun and living a wildly free life. Sometimes she even grew close to other men, and Brian naturally confronted her. Their fights became more and more frequent. Joyce said Brian didn't compensate her, and Brian said Joyce didn't understand the hardship of his having to support a family. Joyce said it's better to seize the moment. Why work so hard to earn so much? Life brings nothing in and takes nothing out, she argued, but deep down Brian didn't think that way. To him, money was the only thing that gave him confidence. Before, going to school had my family's support. Now that I've graduated and joined a company, I have to earn my own money. Besides, Brian has 2 older brothers and 2 younger brothers. 2 of them are illegitimate children whom Charles acknowledged and brought into the Yee family. The internal power struggles are fierce. Brian is mediocre in ability. In the last life he had the backing of my main family, which is what let him control most of the group's power. This time, without my help, even if he remembers the previous life, his situation isn't good. He sneered lightly, I'm just too restless and wanted someone to talk to. I didn't expect to come to you. Do you think I'm pretty much a failure now? I said coolly, everyone has the life they want and the path they want to take. Since you've chosen this road, whether you succeed or fail depends on how you define it. You and I are no longer relevant to each other. I have a fiancé now. Mr. Brian, if you need someone to confide in next time, you'd better find someone else. My man gets jealous easily. Thinking of Nathan, I couldn't help smiling. Brian stared at me in a daze, about to say more, but I cut him off. If Mr. Brian has nothing else, I'll be going now. Goodbye. No sooner had I reached the car than Nathan grabbed me and kissed me fiercely. Meeting his possessive gaze, I tapped his forehead with a smile. Don't worry, I don't go back to old flames. After all, with Mr. Nathan standing tall like a great tree, I couldn't bear to let go. The wedding took place as scheduled 2 months later. The ceremony was grand and dreamlike. The moment my father placed my hand into Nathan's, I saw his eyes redden. When the officiant announced the exchange, he slipped the ring onto my finger, kissed my forehead, and solemnly said, I love you. I put the ring on him as well, looking at his beaming face, I love you too. There will be people in this world who betray your affection, but there are also those who hold a heart of pure sincerity. People with true hearts should not be wronged, so, Nathan, in this life I choose you. Even if I keep a part for myself, all the rest of my affection is yours. If you do not betray me, I will stand by you to the end. Married life remained simple and happy. But at that moment a story broke online about Joyce getting drunk and checking into a hotel with someone. The time and place were crystal clear, and netizens were gossiping non-stop. Brian was cornered by reporters in front of the Yee family's gate. He looked completely haggard. The reporters' questions grew sharper and sharper. On the live feed, he snatched a microphone from a reporter, shoved through the crowd, and left. I skimmed past that news item and went back to the newly released policy updates. My phone rang. I looked at the man who had just been on the live broadcast and frowned as I answered. Heavy breathing came through the line. Selena, I regret it. Can we get back together? I reminded him, Brian, don't, both of us have our own partners now, and even if we didn't, I still wouldn't marry you. Heh, but in our last life you were my wife. We're the ones who are meant to be together. My heart skipped a beat. There was something off about his tone. I don't understand what you're talking about. If this isn't work-related, don't call me again. I'm happily married to my husband now. Please stop intruding on my life. I hung up and blocked him, but a sense of unease lingered. I couldn't focus on work, so I packed my things and went home. When I reached the parking lot and sat in the car, something felt wrong. I glanced in the rearview mirror and widened my eyes. I flung the door open to get out, but a needle plunged into the back of my neck, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again I saw Brian's back. I sat there weakly and looked around, the rooftop of the school. My body was mostly intact. Brian, what are you doing? Do you know this is kidnapping? Brian turned and knelt in front of me, his voice gentle. Selena, I was wrong. The person who suits me best is you. Joyce is only right for dating, you are the one fit to be my wife. Can we start over? I planned in my head. We could, but let's talk somewhere else. He stared fixedly for a moment. You're lying. Selena has always been that clever. I knew it, you wouldn't be willing. Trying to think of another way to get out of this, huh? He stood up and smiled indifferently. It's fine if you won't agree. Selena, do you know about past and present lives? In the last lifetime we were husband and wife. We lived happily, had both a son and a daughter, the envy of everyone. Everything in this life is just a mistake. Now, I'm going to restore everything that was. My heart dropped. What does he mean by that? I felt for the phone in my pocket and discreetly sent a message underneath. Brian chuckled indifferently, you can call them if you want. Even if the police come, it won't change anything, we'll just end up back where we started. Hearing that, I immediately dialed the police and explained the situation. Then I called Nathan and asked him to bring Joyce over, maybe she could reason with the current Brian. Brian listened to my call and glanced at his watch, saying there were still half an hour left. I looked at the time on my phone and suddenly remembered that in my previous life the plane went down exactly half an hour from now. I stared at Brian in horror. Are you crazy, Brian? You've already chosen the life you wanted. If things go badly, do you want to risk your life to be reborn? If you want to die, fine, I don't. Don't drag me down with you. I tried to take a couple of steps but my legs were weak. Brian half carried me to the edge of the rooftop and looked out at the nearby playground. Do you know? When I was reborn it happened right when I was about to propose to you. If it had worked, we'd be married now, we'd be so happy. I gave a cold laugh. Would we really be happy? If we had gotten together smoothly, you'd probably be pining for Joyce again, wouldn't you? He was silent for a moment. So you were reborn too, then? I thought so, that's why you were so calm when I proposed to Joyce. Perfect timing, then. We'll go back together to the beginning and start over. This time, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life treating you right. I enunciated each word, I won't. Even if I go back to the previous life, I won't be with you. You know my temperament, with those memories, I'd only stay far away from you. 20 minutes later, Nathan arrived with the police, and Joyce came with them. Nathan looked at me anxiously. Brian, I can be your hostage, let Selena come out. Brian shook his head. Nathan clenched his fists tightly. If you have any conditions, just say them. Brian still shook his head, and finally Joyce cursed. Brian, I knew you still have feelings for Selena. What, now you want to die with her or what? Brian glanced at Joyce and snorted. Looking back now, the days with you seemed happy, but they were actually pretty boring, either drinking or clubbing, nothing meaningful. Joyce sneered back, then break up. Now you say it was meaningless. Weren't you the one who partied the hardest back then? Now you're tired of it and call it meaningless. Damn it, I really regret marrying you. If I could do it over, I'd stay as far away from you as possible. Brian nodded. That's true, I just want a do-over. He glanced at the time and murmured, time's up. I was startled. Brian, even if it were a do-over, I could never choose you. He looked at me intently. I think you're right. If you went back with your memories, you definitely wouldn't forgive me, so. He let go of me. I'll go back on my own. I'll change the ending, start over, everything that belongs to me, I'll take back. I collapsed helplessly. Nathan rushed over, scooped me up, and ran down the stairs. Only when we reached the ground did I see the ambulance parked to one side. And the airbags scattered on the floor. I stayed in the hospital for a month before my body recovered. In the meantime I heard that Brian had not died, on the contrary, he was paralyzed and had suffered brain damage, recognizing no one. There was almost no hope of recovery. Joyce sued Brian for divorce, and in the end the Yee family stepped in and dissolved their marriage. Brian, who had forgotten everything, spent the rest of his life in a care facility. Nathan and I had 2 children, one took his surname, the other took mine. We walked hand in hand year after year. Those who give their hearts honestly receive honest returns.